The reason I wanted to do this is because you have some years on me, and I gravitate towards people that have been following the Lord way longer than I have, because there's a wisdom there. And frankly, I have enough people in my life that are friends and even mentors who have just decided somewhere along the way that they don't want to follow the Lord anymore. That makes me gravitate even more towards people who've got years on me and their faith has a lot more miles on it. So I want to get into a lot of that kind of stuff with you. But first, what I've noticed about you is you've worn a lot of hats within the church. Give us a quick overview of some of the things you've done, some of the capacities that you served in, because you're the music guy, the piano guy, but you're also the brotherhood guy, but you're also the care pastor. You've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so it goes back probably not long after Rhonda and I got married that we got fairly involved with youth. We were, back then we called them youth sponsors. And we did that for a number of years. Even when Melissa came along, we felt that responsibility to to serve in some kind of capacity as a volunteer in the children's area. We actually taught the 1-year-olds for 1 year. We felt like we did our duty.
When was this?
This was 1981, 1982. And, for years, I didn't play the piano. I came here when I was 16. So probably about age 20, 21 is when I started playing the piano. And eventually, I just kind of by default became the pianist. I mean, I played for years and years for choir. And I was a lot different person then. I probably wasn't the friendliest person. People may even still say that. But I was really focused on what I did.
Yeah.
And I volunteered forever. Funny thing is, Rhonda and I were youth sponsors twice.
Yeah.
That probably wasn't the brightest thing to do. But
And you're both volunteers at this point.
Both volunteers. I didn't really come on staff till the year 2000, and that was part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the associate music pastor. But we've done that. I've done ministry. I do senior adults. I'm in charge of prayer partners. I do the care ministry, which I actually care now. Back then, I probably didn't care that much. But I didn't understand the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand the responsibility.
Gotcha.
I've been the discipleship pastor. I was really into that when we started a program for new believers.
Wow.
So, I've done a lot of hats, and I can wear them and wear them pretty good. Not to brag on me. It's just, the Lord gifted me.
Yeah.
And I've just tried to keep that in check and taking that responsibility.
Yeah. That's good. So I have to ask about this because I think it's, from what I've gathered, it's a big part of your story. You running the funeral business. How long did you do that?
So I was in the funeral business for 20 years.
Okay.
We had reached a point in our life where I had actually lost a job.
Mm-hmm.
That day, I write about it in my mentorship group. That day was the best day of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is it turned me in the direction that have gotten me to where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
But I was out of work for a while. I went to work for Wendy's and hated it.
Yeah.
I disliked it. I didn't hate it. I disliked it.
Yeah.
But I had a friend that was in the funeral business. So I went to work for him on December the 1st, 1990.
Wow.
And
I was 3 years old.
hey, wow. So I was in that for a while. I wasn't really directly involved with it. I was doing like pre-need sales, selling prearranged funerals.
Yeah.
And didn't like that. But we had a kid come in. He was 16 years old, and he was doing what they called a mentorship. I didn't understand. I didn't know any of this. And he would come and he just kind of observe what we do. So one day I was asking the owners, hey, how come I'm not doing a mentorship?
Yeah.
And they said, well, how come you're not? Or an apprenticeship, how come you're not? And I said, well, I think I want to do that. And they said, well, we wanted you to do that, but we wanted it to be your idea.
Yeah.
So the plan was to go to Dallas, move to Dallas for 15 months because they had a school there. And then one of the owners passed away suddenly.
Wow.
So I found myself going to TCC for 2 years and then commuting to Edmond, Oklahoma 3 days a week.
Wow.
For about 1.5 years and got licensed. And then I was just in the business a long time.
We did a funeral here at Woodlake some time ago. And I just randomly felt the need to ask you how many funerals you'd done. Do you remember your answer?
No, I don't remember.
How many have you done? Ballpark.
Probably a couple thousand.
Couple thousand funerals.
Yeah.
Does that have any effect on your personality after going through that many funerals? Or the way you view the world?
Oh, totally the way you view the world, because I dealt with death every day. And you would be surprised at the people that didn't grieve.
Wow.
And you might be surprised at the people that do grieve.
Yeah.
And, everyone wants to think their loved one went to heaven. And to me, I learned a valuable lesson that you don't have to necessarily put people in heaven.
Yeah.
Because that certainly is not my decision or your decision, but just to give people comfort and hope, to me was the focus.
Yeah.
But I dealt with it all the time. Probably the hardest thing I dealt with were children that passed away.
Man.
And they could be from a stillborn to a teenager.
Yeah.
For various reasons. But after a while, that was a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour day.
Wow.
Job, and it wears on you emotionally. It wears on you physically. Mm-hmm. You get, I wouldn't say hardened to it, but it's just, that's what you dealt with every day.
Yeah.
So people that couldn't understand why I did what I did, I don't know why I did what I did, but it really shaped me and molded me. Yeah. To have compassion for people. Yeah. And that's good. Prior to that, I really didn't have a lot of compassion. I mean, I wasn't hard-nosed. I was so focused on what I was doing ministry-wise. Yeah. That I was doing the task that is everything to do with people, but the people weren't the focus. The task was the focus. Yeah. And when I switched it to where the task is going to happen, and the people are the focus, it was a game changer.
Wow. And so you're saying by working in the funeral business, it was like God was developing that in you through that.
He was, because I had to greet people. I had to be there in front of people, and I had to make them feel welcome. I needed to make them feel appreciated and glad they were there, without saying, "Hey, I'm glad you're here." Well, why are you glad I'm here? Because so and so died. Yeah. So it was a fine line between what do you say to someone and what you not say to somebody. And I learned some good lessons with interaction with people and how to start a conversation. Yeah. And before that, I wasn't even interested in those things. Yeah. But when I got people, my focus on people, that was, I mean, I've gotten to know a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And it's not for what I could do for them or what they could do for me. It was just having that relationship.
Yeah. And what I've gathered in my short time of doing ministry is that you just can't teach. You can't sit in a classroom and learn how to care for people. You gotta like do it. You gotta be hands-on. You actually have to interact with people. And it sounds like I mean, I've only been a part of a handful of funerals, and the opportunity is definitely there.
Yeah, because first of all, you got a captive audience. And I mean, really, our job is to care for people. It doesn't matter what role you're in ministry. It's not about you. It's about people.
Yeah.
And otherwise, who do they have to turn to?
Mm-hmm.
So when they know they've got a safe place to come to, they've got someone that actually cares, you get flooded with, discipleship wise. I had a guy that was going through a rough time, and I took him fishing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a safe thing to do, right? I mean, I wanted to start a conversation with him about his relationship and his marriage and where that was going. So I took him fishing, and before he could get a line in the water, or I could get a line in the water, he's already throwing up all over me.
Yeah.
And I didn't even say anything. I just created an environment. And what I mean by throwing up all over me, he just started gushing all these things that he was going through. And I didn't do anything but listen.
Yep.
That was it.
Yeah.
I don't have to have the answers. I can help people process things.
Yeah.
And walk through things, but the listen was the big thing.
Yeah. And what I've noticed is people then, when you create that type of environment and you know how to close your mouth and listen, people think you are the best thing since sliced bread. When all you're doing is listening, because not everyone knows how to listen. They
don't. And the biggest thing about that is that really shows whether you care or not.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Or I was about to say your ability to listen is tied to your level of care.
Yeah, I mean, so many people have an agenda. They think they have an agenda, or they think they have to control a situation. And if you'll just be quiet and let them talk and not interrupt them, you'll find out everything you need to know about somebody, because they're going to tell you.
Yeah.
And you become you're not on an agenda, or you're not looking for agenda. They are the agenda.
Yeah.
And sometimes people, that's all they need, because no one else, who else is listening? Mm-hmm. No one. And they're finding someone to listen. Now, there's a danger in that. The danger is, especially when you're dealing with someone of the opposite sex, is you listen, but you don't create an environment where you're giving too much empathy, or you're creating this environment of a connection that doesn't need to be a connection.
Yeah. Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I want to circle back around to that, because I wasn't thinking about that for this conversation, but I think you have a lot of wisdom there. So I want to table that for a second. Doing the funeral business for 20 years, when you look back at that, do you feel like there was a natural transition to vocational ministry in the church?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like in the church, that was a piece of the puzzle in my mind that was missing. Mm-hmm. I mean, people cared, people were doing things, but I came in from a different standpoint of view of knowing how a family was feeling when they lost a loved one, or what I could do to enhance that church experience for them. Yeah. So when we do a funeral here, I kind of look at it like I'm the guy in charge, even though I may not be the guy in charge. I know what needs to happen, or things that need to be done that other people aren't thinking about doing. I'll even go into the funeral home with them, mm-hmm. If they allow that. And I'm the representative of the church now, so I'm bringing the church aspect of it, so they don't have to finish that meeting and go to another meeting with the staff of the mm-hmm. church or something like that. I'm there, mm-hmm. and I can say, we're going to do this, and we can do this, and hey, let us do this for you.
Yeah.
And make that opportunity.
So how did the transition actually happen? Did someone in the church say, hey, Mike, you ought to come work for the church?
No. What we were doing, Rhonda and I, is I had felt a call into the ministry, so I was going through the steps to become licensed and things like that while I was doing the funeral business. And I was also part-time at the church. And there was our plan was to leave. We were going to leave Woodlake after all those years and go into full-time ministry somewhere else. That's what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
We had our house sold. We knew our game plan. And that all came to a head when the pastor decided to hire me part-time. Mm-hmm. And I really don't want to get into a lot of that. It wasn't the most pleasant experience I've ever had.
Gotcha.
But it was a very valuable experience.
Yeah. What year was this?
This was 1994, possibly. No, this was more like 1998.
Okay.
When I started that process, it was April of 2000 when that came to, like, I was hired by the church.
Okay. So without going into all those details of what that looked like, you said something a second ago that I've noticed a lot of people, so the phrase you said is, I felt called to ministry, and then you just kept going. But there are some people who are like, I feel called to ministry, but I don't know if I'm actually called to ministry. And there's months and months and months of praying and trying to figure that out. Am I actually called to ministry, or is this just some cool idea that I have? Did you ever feel anything like that, or were you just positive you were called to ministry?
Oh, it was positive.
Why?
Well, so second time around in serving as a sponsor, youth volunteer. The youth pastor on a Wednesday night asked me to go to camp, which would have been on Monday.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? Because I need a male counselor. And I said, well, let me tell you, if you can, you go to my boss who owned the funeral home. If you can convince him to let me off next week on 3 days notice. Yeah. I'm thinking in my mind, good luck on that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Then I'll go, because I knew I wasn't going.
Yeah.
And he went and asked him, and he said yes. Wow. And it's like, what? Yeah. So on Thursday, I'm calling the youth pastor saying, hey, what do I do when I get there? He says, don't worry about it. You'll know. Wow. And Friday I called the youth pastor, and Saturday I called the youth pastor, and Sunday I saw him and I said, hey, what am I supposed to do when I get there? He says, don't worry about it. You'll know what to do. Wow. So, I mean, Monday morning I roll around. My teenage guys didn't even know I was going. I show up in a suit and shorts and suit coat and shorts, and they're like, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to camp. They were ecstatic, more ecstatic than I was. Yeah. We go to camp Monday night, first service, and I'm standing outside in the back of the tabernacle, and Kevin Norwood's leading worship, and Reggie Dabbs gets up to speak, and wow. I think, this is pretty cool. This is a great environment. And Reggie gives an altar call. Wow. Like 5 minutes into his sermon, he gives an altar call and tells all the campers, hey, go find your sponsor or your counselor. And I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? So I'm standing outside, and all my guys find me, and they come up to me, and you know what? I knew what to do. And that started a tug. It's like, I always thought it would be music ministry. And I think music ministry kind of set me up. But when I finally answered that call, this is 2 years later, I'm at a camp, youth camp again. I was stupid. Like, 34 years old. What are you doing with a youth sponsor? It used to be the 20s. Yeah. And the guy that was running the camp is a pastor now. But so I'm in the New Bern Center of the old campground in the restroom, and he walks in. And I said, hey, Rodney, I really felt like God's calling me into ministry. I'd really like to talk to you about it.
Rodney who?
Ronnie Founds.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
And
full circle.
Yeah.
That was our old pastor.
Yeah. So he said, okay, let's talk. I said, dude, we're in the bathroom. He said, no, come on, let's talk. And that kind of started it. So when I started the studies, people knew me.
Yeah.
And it's like, him in ministry? I don't think so. Wow. When I made that jump to actually full time, it started out music related, but I knew it wasn't going to end up music related.
Yeah.
You know, because things were changing. I'm an old guy now, and I was good with that. I didn't have a problem with that because I felt like I did that up until I was supposed to do that, but now I'm supposed to do something else.
Yeah.
And I just stepped right into it.
So, rewinding just a little bit, you were doing the funeral business. God starts developing this compassion for people. So, because last night I was thinking about this, like, how in the world did he transition from the funeral business to full-time ministry in the church? But that now, when you put it the way you did, it seems very natural because you developed a compassion for people, and that's what it became about.
Yeah, I wasn't equipped. So, I mean, God will equip you.
Yeah.
You don't have to, there's not a book on this.
Yeah. That's why we're talking to you.
I mean, you go to school and you do all these studies, but they don't prepare you for the real world.
Yeah.
When you're actually dealing with people, and you think, well, and you got this concept of what a pastor does all day and looks like all day, and I mean, I was the guy that would walk in to church and I'd see all these people sitting around talking. It's like I was doing a job. It was 7 hours it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was busy.
Hey, for a second, just give me like a 60-second overview. I know that's probably hard, but for someone who has no clue what you were doing in the funeral business, what like list out some of the things you were doing on a regular basis.
Oh, so I was taking all the calls, and I found out real quick that no one dies when it's convenient. They die in the middle of the night. Guess who gets woke up? That's me.
Wow.
And my beeper goes off or my phone goes off in the middle of the night, and I've got to get up and I've got to deal with this on the phone. And you don't go back to sleep and say, I'll be there in the morning. You know, you go then to wherever that facility may be, a hospital, a nursing home, a home, whatever that may be. So, and then you get the person back, and if you're the body, if you're going to prep them, they're still a person. That's why I kind of refer.
Yeah, yeah.
when you
just want to be clear,
when you get them back, that's the best time to prep them. So, you know, on a good night, I'd get 3 or 4 hours sleep.
Wow.
It always get interrupted, and eventually that gnawed away at my health and things like that. But yeah, and then you'd have to meet the family, which I didn't do a lot of that, but I still had to be there.
Yeah.
You know, so you're there at the funeral home all day long, and then sometimes you may be up half the night.
So you're doing everything from, you're taking the call,
picking a body up, doing the preparation of the body, and then
were you doing the embalming, or is that someone else?
No, I did that.
You did that?
Yeah, I did all that.
Wow.
Yeah. Dress them, casket them, take care of flowers, arranging, and then, you know, pack everything up, go to a facility, unpack everything, and conduct a funeral. Then you're, you know, summertime, you're standing out in the cemetery, it's 100 degrees and you're in a suit.
Yes, yes.
In wintertime, you're out in the cemetery and it's freezing cold.
Wow.
You know, you go, I mean, it's just, yeah.
So you're doing everything.
I do, yeah.
Were you even dealing with like the financial side of it?
No, not really.
Okay. But you did everything. Wow.
Yeah.
One of the strangest images I have that I've seen is my own dad. So after my dad passed, his body had already been prepped, and I'm pretty sure he already had a suit on. I think I can't remember that part, but I remember sitting in this back room of the church where his funeral was. I was watching my brother trim his beard. And I was just like, what the heck am I looking at right now? Like, I'm watching my brother trim my father's bodies, like his beard and all this. I'm like, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. But I can't imagine seeing something like that, which that's different. That was my dad. But seeing that over 1,000 times, maybe 2,000 times, that's a lot.
Well, it is, but it becomes an art.
Yeah.
Because you want to be able to present an image to people that they can remember and hold on to.
Yeah.
Instead of at that point of death when the person looks the worst.
So that's compassion on another level.
I mean, because even then it's a very emotionally charged time, but I mean, the funeral's not for the dead person. Mm-hmm. The funeral's for the living.
Yeah.
So we can help process through this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a part of life.
Yeah.
But even at that point of death, you're not prepared. I mean, you can prepare all you want to, but I mean, you're really not prepared, and the reality of it sets in. But then we have the hope, of seeing them again. It's not like it's over.
Yeah.
They've just transitioned on, and that's just a shell, and it's a tent, and we're putting it away.
That's good. So you go from the funeral business to ministry. You develop this compassion for people, and in the process, it's not like God just picked you up out of the funeral business and dropped you into ministry. You were already serving in the church.
I was already serving in the church. Here's the strange part of it is I was accepted in my own church. And that's kind of unheard of. Yeah.
So how long had you been at Woodlake at that point?
Well, I started at Woodlake in 1974. So now we're in year 2000. Yeah. So I've been there a lot, and I knew everybody. Yeah. I knew everyone because of the size of the church.
But not everyone knew you as Mike Cooper, the pastor. They knew you as the funeral business guy and the pianist.
Oh, yeah. So you can imagine when I'd show up in the funeral business at a hospital, it's like in a suit, it's like, we're not ready for you.
I never thought of that.
Like that was, it was harder, I think, for me. Yeah. To make that transition because then I still was in the funeral business. Yeah. So like, who's the guy that showed up? Is it the associate music pastor, or is it the funeral director? Yeah. And sometimes I'd make a joke with people, but that was kind of my sick humor. And, people would come to a funeral and they might see us laughing. So if you ever go to a funeral and you see a funeral director laughing, they're not laughing at you. They're not laughing at that situation. They're just trying to cope with their own, hey, I'm dealing with this all the time. Yeah. Let's, tell me something funny so I can laugh.
Oh, wait a second. We got to pause this. So you told me a story. We were at a funeral, and it was right after I asked you, how many funerals have you done? And you said, whatever, 1,500, 2,000. And then I think you just randomly thought of this story and you told us. But all I remember is, it's not funny, but it's funny. All I remember is that a body came flying out of a casket or falling out of a casket. No. Tell me the story.
Okay, so we had an associate pastor who had never done a funeral. So it wasn't our funeral, it was another funeral. So I was trying to help him walk through the process so he would know what to do. So, small chapel, small group of people. It's a good first time experience. So he goes and does his funeral. And I said, it's important that you give people hope. Don't worry about, putting them in heaven. I mean, that's not our job to do. Now, if you knew for certain, okay, but I've watched a lot of people put people in heaven. It's like, okay, whatever. Yeah. So he goes and does his funeral. I said, now when you finish the funeral, like you pray at the end, you come off the platform, he goes down and stand by the head of the casket, and the funeral director will come and they'll open the casket up and they'll pass people by, and you're there just to, shake hands with people or, just to be present. Yeah. So he does this, and the funeral director doesn't show up. And he's just standing there, and the funeral director doesn't show up. He says it was like 5 minutes. And finally the funeral director showed up. He had to take a phone call, which meant he was probably back in the back room drinking coffee, maybe watching a TV show, and didn't realize that the funeral was over.
Yeah.
So he comes in and they pass all the people by, and I said, now what's going to happen is the casket, they're going to take the casket out and put it in the funeral coach. So you need to like lead the procession. So you go out the front door, the pallbearers with the casket's going to be behind you. They're going to roll it out, and then the family's behind that. So he gets out to the front door of the chapel, and they open, and there's like 3 steps down, which is no big deal, but there's no funeral coach. So he,
I'm remembering.
so they, this was downtown Broken Arrow. The streets are not long streets, not like you'd be in New York, long streets. So they get on the sidewalk and realize the funeral coach is parked down the street on the curb. So the casket bearers decide they're gonna carry the casket. It's not that far. They're gonna carry the casket. So they take hold of the casket and they're carrying it down. They walk down to the funeral coach and they open the door of the funeral coach, and there's a casket in there. It's like, oh my word, there's another casket in here. Well, so the funeral director was embarrassed. So it was an empty casket. They were delivering the casket to the funeral home, and they forgot to take the casket out. And now they're doing a funeral. So he gets out the church trucks and what they call it. And so he unloads the casket, and the guy's putting the casket with the body into the funeral coach. Well, this guy's rolling this casket down the street by himself on the church trucks, and it falls off in the middle of the road. The empty casket falls.
The empty casket.
The empty casket.
Okay.
I mean, you can't make this up. You can't make this story up. It's the funniest thing. And to hear this associate pastor, he was mortified. But it was funny.
Okay. So where were we? So
we're talking about transition.
You transitioned to ministry, and your first year in full time, or you were part time, right?
My first year full time.
Okay. Your first year of full time ministry, vocational ministry in the church. What are some of the biggest lessons you learned your first year? Do you remember?
I was lost.
You were lost?
I was lost.
Meaning you didn't have any like...
I didn't know what to do.
Okay.
I was always doing something.
Yeah.
So now I show up and I'm full time. And I was lost. I didn't know what to do. Now, I'm not saying I didn't know what to do on Sunday, Wednesday. I didn't know what to do with my time during the week.
Yeah.
So now I got it.
Yeah.
When I'd walk in and I'd see, people sitting around and have a conversation. I didn't know what the conversation was, but I find myself now doing a lot of conversations.
Yeah. So if I came to you and I was like, hey, Mike, this is my first year. I'm really lost. I don't know what to do with my time. What are you telling me to do my first year? Well,
obviously, it's something we go through all the time with staff. Wednesday's coming, Sunday's coming.
Yeah.
So there's everything to do with prepping for what's coming.
Yeah.
And so like part one of my responsibility is prayer partners. And I have some people that I use every week. I have some people that I don't use every week. And it's not that I don't like them or I have my favorites or like that. I don't want to burn people out. So I actually let the Holy Spirit kind of lead me on, hey, who should we put on for this particular week or this particular assignment? And so I've tried to do that. And I have a lot of conversations with people that I'm caring for, or I have lunches with people or coffees with people. And I find myself busy enough, but it's not like I'm just sitting around doing nothing. But there's sometimes I'm sitting around doing nothing because I need to sit around and do nothing.
So there's one thing I noticed. Is actually before I came on staff here. I'm gonna make a really long story short. I grew up in church. I felt like right before I came on staff here, I felt like I knew it as much about church and ministry as a person could, not being a pastor on staff. I felt like I knew a lot, but I didn't. And the main thing I didn't understand about vocational ministry is that the pastor is not supposed to do it all. I grew up seeing lots of different examples of pastors who did all the work of ministry. And I heard Jamie preach his sermon back when we were just attending. He read Ephesians 4, he read the fivefold ministry, and he put a lot of emphasis in his Jamie Austin way. I think he may have stomped the floor, but he said, the passage says that the fivefold ministry is supposed to equip the church to do the work of ministry. They're not supposed to do it all. And what I'm getting at is I don't think the average person who's like, man, I think I might be called to ministry, I don't think that person understands that the pastor is not supposed to do it all, and that they are working with people, they're having conversations with people, they're building a team, and they're equipping the church to do the work of ministry. I don't think the average person understands that.
They don't. And here's the part of it. You're right. The pastor's job is to equip the people. And you can equip the people all you want to equip the people, but the people still need to be motivated to do the work. And sometimes they're not motivated to do the work.
Wow.
And probably the biggest reason they're not motivated to do the work is because you're not leading them. Wow. And it's because you're not leading them. It's because you don't have a relationship with them. I mean, I know this is the greatest, worst invention in the world, but I can text people all day long to say, hey, I need you to do this. Mm-hmm. But if I don't have a relationship with them, they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So it's about, it's not about what needs to be done. It's about who do I have that I have a relationship with that can do this.
That's good.
Because so many pastors get caught up in doing, like you said, everything.
Yeah.
And if you're doing everything, then you're doing one of two things. You're wearing yourself out and you're doing somebody else's job.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it look at me and look what I did.
Yeah.
Oh my word. Get out of here.
Yeah.
But who do I know that's in the church that does this well?
Yeah.
And why would I deny them an opportunity to serve the body of Christ, as simple as that may be? Mm-hmm. Because I'm standing in the lobby and I need to go get my prayer partner badges. I could easily go get my prayer partner badges, but I could also say, hey, because people want to serve.
Yeah,
they want to help. But if they don't know what you need done, then suddenly you just disappeared.
Yeah.
When you need to be present. And say, hey, would you mind running over and getting those for me? And they'll do it. But you got to have a relationship with them.
And so for someone who thinks, I really want the person who feels called to ministry but doesn't really understand what happens between Wednesday and Sunday, I want that person to hear what you have to say about that, because that could shift your perspective even a little bit to say, okay, I won't just be sitting behind a desk reading Ephesians for 5 days. There's a lot of team building. There's a lot of relationship building, and there's a lot of equipping people to help carry the ball forward.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of something that we've really kind of driven home as of lately is everyone's job is everyone's job from a standpoint of, we've got, situations, and they're not necessarily bad situations, but we have situations because we're dealing with people. The greatest thing about ministry is you're dealing with people. the hardest thing about ministry is you're dealing with people. So, there may be situations where you have a husband and wife or children. And so now you've got all these dynamics because you've got a children's pastor and youth pastor. And you're talking about using people, in a sense of volunteering. You're talking about utilizing them to the best that they can do. You don't need someone that is highly musically talented, taking the trash out.
Yeah.
But you need the trash taken out. There are people that do that, and it doesn't make them of lesser value.
Yeah.
It just means that's what they do extremely well.
Yeah.
Because they want to serve, they want to do things. So you're always constantly thinking about how to utilize people. You're planning what you may say at an opening devotion. You're planning what you may say on a Wednesday night. It's not when I do the prayer list on Wednesday night. Anybody can do the prayer list, but I'm the care person.
Yeah,
it makes sense for me to do that.
Yeah,
because I know the stories of some of the people that are on this prayer list.
For sure.
So I can share that, or I can motivate people with. That's just something I don't think about 1 minute before I take the stage. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about that on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. For most of the day. I look at the song list. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about something that is unrelated. I want to try to, and then of course the Holy Spirit factors into that and changes the whole thing. But that's the beauty of it, because you can walk with that.
Yeah. But
it's a constant planning. It's a constant communication, and people don't understand that. We don't show up on Sunday morning and this just happens.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Few rapid fire questions. We're out of time, but I have to ask you these few things. And we're definitely going to have to do this again, because you need like 3 or 4 of these sessions to even come close to capturing everything that you've done in ministry. First question though, quick answer. What percentage of...
Before you do it, do you want to switch this back to the...
Nah, let's just not worry about it.
Okay.
Let's just roll with it. Okay. For most people, they think pastors spend 90% of their time reading the Bible and prepping a sermon. That is incorrect. What is a more realistic ratio, or how much time would you say the average pastor spends prepping a sermon during their week?
They probably spend 10 to 15 hours. And,
give us a percentage.
15% of their time.
Yeah.
The other percentage of time is people.
Yeah. The average person, I guarantee you, thinks it's definitely over 50, but probably closer to 90. Right before I came into this role, I thought it was 50-50.
No.
And I'm blown away by how it is closer to 15. I was saying 20. But it's still an important component of what you're doing. But it's not like you're stroking your beard all week long. What did Paul mean in Ephesians 3? Like, there's a time and place for that, but it's not the majority of the time.
Well, and it's always in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny how God will reveal things along the way until you get to that moment of delivering whatever message He's prepared for you to give. But you're always processing that. But we're in the people business, not the paperwork business.
Yeah, that's good.
And we've got to hear the Lord. So take the average person and you sit down with them and say, hey, what's God saying to you? And they're like, well, He's not saying anything to me. Well, are you praying? Well, I don't really do, a whole lot of that. Are you reading His Word? Well, I don't do a whole lot of that. Well, how do you expect Him to be talking to you, And it's even more than just reading, it's listening,
mm-hmm.
And processing. So you take that average person and then you put that into a pastor that's magnified 1,000 times,
mm-hmm.
because they're not wanting to get up there and think, I'm going to give this message on what I think you should be doing. But unfortunately, there may be people that do that.
Yeah.
Instead of, or what's happening in the world right now, and I've got to address that. Well, certain things we need to address, but we don't have to address everything. And so, I mean, a pastor is always thinking about what does the Lord want me to do? How do I say that? And who is it that I need to sit down and talk with or have a conversation with, or who I need to call to encourage or whatever? Those are things that are constantly on our mind.
Yep. That's good. Okay. Last question. We'll bring it home. Can you recall a moment when you were new in your first pastor role, maybe your first or second pastor role, where you thought, I am for sure in the right spot? Like, I know for sure God called me to this.
Yeah. So I was struggling on like, what do I do? And my first sermon I gave on a Sunday morning, it was July 4th weekend. And
You remember your text?
no, I don't. But the pastor had an iPad, so I thought, well, I need an iPad, and all my notes on an iPad. So I go out and buy a brand new iPad, and so I'm walking out on the platform, and I set up my iPad, and suddenly the iPad slips and it falls on the ground, and I thought I just shattered the screen on it, and it was like I was stunned. I didn't know what to do, and I'm looking out at the congregation and looking at me, and it's like, you got to do something. Because, like...
Did it break?
It didn't break, but it was a disaster. So in my mind, I had this concept that I needed to be like the pastor.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed because I wasn't like the pastor. I didn't talk like him. I couldn't deliver like him. I couldn't hold that big room. Put me in a small room, I could hold the small room, but like I was depressed.
Yeah.
And I had a coach to help me transition. And it was a lady. She's great coach. And she asked me some of the most profound questions. But the bottom line is this. At the end of that particular session, I was crying because I wanted to be that instead of what God had made me.
Yeah.
And so she asked me, if you left Woodlake today, like, if you walked out the door today, what would happen? I said, well, they would have to hire someone to take my place. And it would probably take them a year just to get the culture of who we are as a congregation. And some other things. Well, what would be the responsibilities? Would they need to do this and this and this? Because I was still wearing a lot of hats. And it's like, she said to me, well, in your position, it sounds like you're number one.
Wow.
And it hit me. I mean, it hit me. It's like, yeah. So why do I have to be that?
Wow.
If this is what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm killing it.
Yeah.
I don't need to be that.
Yeah.
That's how the body of Christ works.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the eyes, and I'm the big toe.
Yeah.
But I was a good big toe. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's good.
So it's like, you don't have to be somebody else. Be yourself.
Yeah.
God can work with that. Like, that's the biggest thing about me dealing with people. Tell me the real you.
Yeah.
Because I can work with that. But don't come in here thinking you got to be, this.
Yeah.
And I don't really know who you are. You're just putting a mask on. Take the mask off.
Yeah.
I don't care. You're not going to tell me anything that's going to shock me. I've heard it all.
Yeah.
Tell me who you really are, or tell the Lord who you. I mean, He already knows, but you can work with that.
Yeah.
But suddenly I was number one. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying you found your niche.
I found my identity.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you think, well, I've got to be like that. And no, God didn't call you to be like that. He called you to be you.
Yeah. That's good.
And He can work with you and He'll mold you, but He's not going to make you like that because you already got that. He needs you to be you and mold you and shape you. And then it's like, look out, buddy. I'm telling you, look out.
Yeah.
Because suddenly angels are going to be singing and you're going to love your job.
Yeah.
And then the next day you're not going to love your job. But that's the way it happens.
That's so good.
So I tell people this. The church pays me
Mm-hmm.
to do this. What? They pay me to do this. I love what I do.
Yeah.
And I get paid. I get paid every 2 weeks. But that's not payday. That's not payday. Payday's when I get a note in the mail from somebody that I helped them through a situation. And it's like, we turned around. And I don't even know how you knew about this, but you were there. And just you being there, that's payday. Or you have someone call and say, hey, you know, what you said to us as a couple or whatever, we got it. And it's made all the difference in the world. That's payday. That's what you live for. Not the paycheck. Those moments. And you bottle them up and you remind yourself of that when you're down. Like, you remind yourself of that. That's why you do what you do. Yeah. I love my job.